It's conference championship weekend. And as a Lions fan, I don't care anymore. So I don't care. The season's over. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I'm just kidding. How you doing, Ron? This is Ron from Ron A Sports We Talk. We just get together and have a conversation with no begging for money, begging for likes, or any of that nonsense. We just chew the fat, and hopefully we say something intelligent that other people can benefit from. What's going on today, Ron?
Well, didn't we do this last year, conference championships, and we're going to do it again? Okay, so
Yeah, but
three
last year
games
the
to
Lions
go.
were in the conference championships.
Yeah, yeah, you had a different frame of mind there, but always storylines, always good to rehash what we saw last week and see if we can take some of that information and apply it to this week. And there will be some possibilities that we could do that. Very interesting times in the NFL right now. While the coaching carousel is going on, four teams are fighting to win the Super Bowl.
Well, I think it's in all honesty, I think I was pretty clear that I thought Washington had a puncher's chance. I said literally any team in the NFC could go to the Super Bowl. I was very clear about that. So, and I actually like Washington. It's not like a bitter pill. I'm just happy that I think Houston got jobbed a lot. I don't think the refs cost them the game, but boy, it's tough when you're getting the kind of calls that Kansas City gets, and you got to try to overcome that. I would have hated to lose like the Rams lost, um, and even losing the way Baltimore lost would have been worse. So you know, Detroit shot themselves in the foot. They deserve to lose the game, frankly. I mean, they lost another key defensive starter right out of the gate. But clearly, there was a hell of a lot more problems than that. Some of the decision making Goff had, some of the decision making the coaches had. You can't win with five turnovers. With a better team that day won. And quite frankly, Washington did a pretty darn decent job at a lot of different things. Detroit was not able to, run over them roughshod on the ground for, like I anticipated. I mean, they did at times, but when it counted, Washington stiffened up pretty well.
Well, where do you want to start? You want to start with that game or go in order? How do you want to recap this?
Oh, we might as well go out of order since that we're already talking about that. Let's go back to
Okay.
the Houston game. What were your thoughts on the Lions game?
Okay. On the Lions game, I saw a great deal of that. I actually didn't see because I was at some other function, the Houston KC, but I've read all about it. I've seen some replays and stuff, so I can speak hopefully intelligently on all of these. Washington, Detroit. I as a Detroit fan, I would be sick at how they love to do these gimmicks. Act like you've been there is what is my biggest takeaway from that game. Number one seeds do not need the halfback making a decision. Well, I was supposed to throw, so I'm going to throw the ball even though there's nobody open. You don't even have to call that play. You have Gibbs, you have Montgomery. You didn't stay true to that. Injuries were a big part. Let's face it. We know Detroit had some serious defensive cluster injuries. And part of that is random bad luck. And part of that is not so random, tremendously terrible trades that have two people, 6-for-1 trades. The two people they drafted were healthy scratches all year long. You didn't have a next man up with Hutchinson. You didn't have a next man up in the secondary. These are things that could have been done in April. But I have all these problems with Detroit, but I have to agree with you on Washington. They're a fun team to root for. Nobody's solving Daniels right now. They just do not turn the ball over. This is a relatively brand new team. Detroit's the veteran team. And look what happened with Daniels in the turnover battle. It's incredible the way Washington is performing this year.
Yeah, I wasn't pleased with the Detroit. I didn't. I think I've said it in the past that everybody was getting behind the Lions because they were easy to get behind. And I just feel like they started to get a little bit too full of themselves for what they've accomplished. The scoring the touchdown and having the obscene celebration,
Yeah.
a handful of other things. I just didn't really care for it, and I don't know how to process it, but just the fact that so many coaches are interviewing and dealing with that, and yeah, sure, you can sit there. Ben Johnson, his offense only scored 31 points and had 500 plus yards. So, shame on him for interviewing, but is one of the narratives. But, all these distractions don't help. And it's frustrating. And I don't know what the solution is. It's sort of like with you in college football and bowl season and transfers and all that sort of stuff. It's just a distasteful part of the game. But they made coaching mistakes, inexcusable coaching mistakes. The players, for whatever reason, just didn't seem to be prepared, and the better team won. I mean, that day, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
So, a question for you: a kind of defensive takeaway that I have of Detroit is they don't adapt as well as I'd like them to see in terms of to the opponent faced. I thought they could have made some adjustments, not could have, should have made some adjustments. And it just seemed like it's one game plan fits all. Detroit, Dan Campbell, they say, this is who we are. You can't stop us. And 15 teams couldn't stop them. It's true. Detroit has tremendous number of weapons, especially offensively. But did they really adapt at all defensively during this game?
They kept on doing the same things over and over again. So they didn't change. And that wasn't good. You touched on it. When you're running halfback options, that's just bad. In all honesty, I was wondering whether Johnson was basically costing himself a cushy position, potentially, and whether Aaron Glenn was going to be costing himself his position at the Jets. I mean, apparently not. I mean, it hasn't hurt their brands, surprisingly, but not much to say. I was kind of surprised at a lot of the national media, which turned on the Lions really fast after a game. And maybe it gets back to the sample size. Each game is just worth 10 times that of other sports. And, that just happens. But it's funny because I literally heard people say, wow, that's a shame the Lions, blew their shot. It's like, wait a minute. What are you talking about? They haven't blown their shot.
We're always pushing on the loser. I know that. And we can find fault in our jobs today. And brainstorming is saying what went wrong and stuff like that. But the flip side of it is Washington's living a dream season. And the bottom line is, I know it's the social media world and we all have to write our different things for the media people, this and that, whatever. But let's just embrace what Washington has done. They've got another game against a very familiar opponent that we'll be talking about. And they're one step away from the Super Bowl. A year at this time, that organization was rock bottom. So this is a turnaround that's pretty much unheard of, really.
Yeah, let's get back to them when we talk about this coming week. The other Saturday game was that was interesting. Houston really showed that they belong. They did a decent job, and I was kind of surprised by that. I thought Kansas City, probably should have played better. I thought that. I'll tell you, I've never once been jealous or hateful of Mahomes. I've always been like really respectful. He was taking dives. I mean, it was like soccer, and I don't have the patience for that. I really
Mhm.
don't. I found that extremely distasteful, and that really bothered me. And I don't know whether you saw any of it, but they're getting too many calls. They are, and
Yeah.
it just felt kind of shitty to see. I don't think Houston would have won anyway, but you just never know when you get when you're facing the forces against you. Sometimes how things might have been different.
I'm going to address that issue when we talk about Buffalo, Kansas City. I'm going to address the referee issue head on, actually, which I don't normally do. But before that, everything I heard feedback from others watching some of the key plays and so on is that Houston generally outplayed them a lot of the game. And Mahomes had this incredible pass, which it was interesting. I was listening on the radio on the drive back home, and the announcers on radio were saying it reminded them specifically of a play that Kenny Stabler did a million years ago, uh, throwing it on his knees to the halfback in between three people, and it caught it. And I was thinking that even before he said that, I could visualize that play, and I couldn't wait to go watch that play to see how close that emulated that. It's a Mahomes thing. It's a Stabler thing. They have a feel for the game. Houston shot itself in the foot. I mean, you can't be playing like you did on special teams and doing all that stuff. In bad weather, in playoff situations, special teams gets amplified. And Houston is kind of one and a half steps away from being a big boy. They're not a big boy like Buffalo and Baltimore and like Kansas City, obviously, but they're close. They've got the coaching, they're getting the personnel, they've got the young quarterback, they got Nico Collins. But we saw that they're just kind of one step away. They just do that one thing that shows that they're not quite ready to go to that next level.
Well, they're missing key players too. I mean, that's 2 years in a row they've had to go into the playoffs um, missing key players. I mean, if they were to go in healthy, they'd be able to do some damage, perhaps. But they
Yeah.
played better than I kind of expected them to. Uh, the game basically depended on what kind of line you got on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nice because with my betting techniques, if you had 3 out of the 4 games, that didn't matter which side you were on. You didn't have to deal with the random variance at the end, and it was nice. The way that I set the games up. Because it's just you see the way these games end, and I know it's getting to be droning on, but I mean, why do you want to put yourself in a position where the final play or the final plays are coin flips? It's like give yourself a cushion, find creative ways to give yourself some cushion, and it just positively reinforced this week.
The other positive reinforcement for people who prefer straight bets is have more than one out. Make sure you get the best of the line, because anybody who lost the Ram game or anybody who lost this game, they were cheating themselves. There were eights, there were nines, there were all sorts of different numbers available. The Philly game was 5.5, 6, closed around 7. There were opportunities. So you have to read the market. You have to have more than one place that you could place a wager, and you can be okay with everything that happened. But if you're not, if you're misreading the market or deciding on Sunday morning that now I like this particular side and the old number is gone, and you like the side that's being bet, the steam or whatever you want to call it, you're a little late to the party.
Yeah, it's not a fun way to lose a game
Mm-hmm.
is when you get involved in it too late or at the wrong number.
One or two more things I want to say about the Houston game. Mahomes is playing error free. Right, he wasn't playing error free the first half of the season, and that's really interesting. And one of the things I noted before the game actually didn't come to fruition. because you and I had this conversation. I had this conversation with other people. What's the right power rating to put on Kansas City now that they have Hopkins, now that they have Brown and all these weapons? Now, in one sense, Kelsey was open all over the place because they did have Hopkins and Brown, but those guys combined for 0 catches. So in some ways, I was kind of wrong about the fact that maybe I pushed them up a little too fast, because I know Houston can disrupt. We talked about how Houston just holds everybody down to their worst games. But to hold those 2 receivers to 0 catches, that's pretty amazing. And it shows me that, I think Kansas City, they're going to need these guys. I don't I didn't see the game, so I don't know why they weren't targeted, or maybe Kelsey was just single covered.
I didn't see any sort of increased talent, or I didn't see a noticeable shift in Kansas City. I guess that's just the best way I can put it. It seemed like the Kansas City we saw all season long, but we'll just have to see.
And I was a little surprised with 2 weeks to prep and all kinds of study on this opponent, and Houston having to play all these important games. So I was a little surprised, and I have to say, well, Kansas City, even though I actually had, I had Kansas City in the game, and they underperformed in my opinion.
Well, and they also got the benefit of Houston basically giving them a head start. Big kickoff return, stupid penalty.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were some other things early on in the game that were just like, boy, it's just like you're handing this team, this team's too good to keep following up like this. So, but on to Sunday, the first game was, what was the first? Oh, the first game was the Rams-Philly, right?
Yeah, very interesting game. And for me, I could watch these two as a fan. My power rating said bet Buffalo, but I couldn't do it because I would have second guessed myself, saying all along you've said Buffalo is this and that. Now you're going to bet them. But if you bet numbers, not people or whatever.
I thought we're in the Rams-Philly.
I know, but I wanted to make a point, a long-winded point of saying that these 2 games I was on the sidelines. And so I thought I was analyzing it with a different mindset. And the LA-Philly game, to me, very creative what Philly was coming up with early.
I was surprised at how the game stayed close. Philadelphia let them back in the game. Nobody even mentioned it. Should Barkley have ran that in the end zone? I don't know. They could have.
Yeah, I thought about that for a brief second, but there was too much time left in that particular game. It was past the 2-minute warning, I think, right?
Yeah, it was, but he could have laid down on that 1-yard line, and that would have made a huge difference, because you're handing the ball off to your opponent, and they've got 3 full timeouts and the 2-minute warning left. And they had just recently driven the ball down your throat and scored easily. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I was surprised that wasn't talked about more, because they could have made sure they could have made that a 2-score game and gotten it well under 2 minutes to go instead. So that's what I was thinking about.
No, I understand that. The flip side is the guy missed 2 extra points. So what if he misses a 25-yard field goal?
Well, that's true. It's odd, but I was surprised. I thought that the Philadelphia would be able to wipe them up, and they were unable to. I think Hurts comes out of the game hurt. They say he's going to play, but it's going to affect him. So that's going to be an issue. They were not all that impressive, frankly. I don't know. The Rams looked decent. You got to feel kind of bad for them. Stafford had the valiant comeback attempt, against the short week. traveling, snow, everything. And realistically, I think a lot of people thought the Rams were going to win that game at the end. And Philadelphia, second week in a row where they escape.
Yeah, my mindset was not that the Rams weren't going to score. It was I was already visualizing in my head. Rams are up by 1, 40 seconds to go, no timeouts. How do they get in the field goal position? How does Philadelphia get in the field goal position to win the game by 2 on a kick from a kicker who had missed 2 extra points? I was already conceding the Rams the touchdown, but I thought Philly still would have enough time to get back into the game. Rams played a strategic game. First of all, they really did something I didn't think they would do. I know they're good at sacking. We talked about that, but that Philly offensive line was supposed to be good in pass protection, and they got beaten badly by the Rams in terms of the defensive pressure, and I didn't really see that coming. The other thing I did see that coming, especially the way Stafford's been playing the second half of the year, is once the cornerback went down, Mitchell, for Philadelphia, they were finding creative ways to target Isaiah Rodgers, his backup, the guy who really is more of a returner and nickel guy at best. And now he was tasked to guard Puka and wherever else they can get him into position. And the Rams were continually feasting on matchups. And I thought strategically, the Rams just showed that their coaching is pretty good. They almost pulled that one out. And for Philly, that's a warning sign. You better have all hands on deck. Offensive line better play better, and you better get Mitchell back before this next game.
Yeah, but I'm glad it finished where it did. It worked out well for me, but it was scary. It would not have been as fun if Philadelphia had won the game outright. I mean, if Philadelphia had lost the game.
Yeah, that would have surprised a lot of people. Can you imagine the Rams hosting Washington? That wasn't on anybody's ticket for the title.
Buffalo, Baltimore. That was that game just leaves a bad taste in my mouth all the way around. Obviously it's well known. All 4 losers were the yard winners. Yards per play and in number of yards. The team that had the most lost. So Baltimore just ran up and down the field, never punted, shot themselves in the foot with. And if you got to feel bad for Anders, what a bad timing to have some lapses in judgment, and that 2-point conversion was not an easy catch.
For him, it should have been. He's made difficult catches the last 3 weeks. So he made 3 errors in that game, and it's just stunning. But did it come down to that alone? No. Baltimore lost the turnover battle 3-0, and Buffalo. I mean, this is the change in Josh Allen, where he's not forcing things, he's not fumbling, and all those other things. Buffalo committed 1 penalty the entire game. So if you're going to have a 3-0 turnover advantage and commit 1 penalty, you only won by 2. And I would attack anybody that said, "Oh, Lamar Jackson can't win this or can't win that." Lamar Jackson had a very strong game, and he was able to come from behind. People said he couldn't come from behind. He put them in the right spots. He put them on a spot to get this game to overtime, even though they had this turnover and penalty disadvantage, and it just didn't get done. I feel bad for Baltimore, but that's the nature of playoff football.
But did we see another repeat of the coaching plan getting away from what made them successful? They did not have one designed run for Jackson the entire game. And where the hell was Derrick Henry? How many did he end up with? How many touches? 16 or something?
The problem I had is they kept subbing him out.
Yeah.
I mean, at first you could be tired. It's cold. You have the wind. I understand all those factors, but it's probably not a factor in the third, fourth quarter. And I just didn't like the rotational. Maybe it was a planned rotational thing, but this is losing out, and you can't have planned rotational things. I was surprised, to your point, how much Henry was on the sidelines.
Yeah, he's not even in there as a decoy.
Right.
It seems like the second year in a row they play 17 games, and then they want to come in and in the playoffs just change who they are. I don't know. It just frustrating. I had Baltimore. Didn't bet them straight. Only had them in teasers, and everything won on both sides. So it was a good game. It was gin rummy for me, but just disappointing to see Baltimore, not make it, because I believe Baltimore is the better team. And Buffalo did an okay job. Their defense was not great, but it wasn't horrendous either. So they did make some stops, but no, actually they didn't, did they? No, they didn't. They're only a turnover. Yeah. I don't know. They just didn't seem as bad as they normally are, but I guess they were.
I mean, I really think in a home field advantage, everybody who knows the game knows it's not worth as much as it used to be. But for Buffalo, I think it made all the difference in the world. They just have looked like a more inspired team these last 2 weeks in the playoffs. They went 10-0 during the regular season, but that's a different stat. I just think in front of those home fans and their confidence level was just so high, I don't think they could have pulled it out. And I think Baltimore would have run away, and we'll never know if Baltimore was home to Buffalo. But that was the equalizer, and Buffalo deserved to win. Baltimore messed up. That's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's strange because I just don't feel we've seen the quality of football wasn't that good last week. When you look at all the games across the board, where was the quality football? I mean, you had some exciting finishes and stuff like that, but
I like the strategy. The Philly Ram game I thought was expert strategy, so I like that part. I agree with you on Baltimore. They didn't step it up a notch like the real best teams step it up. I didn't see KC, but it sounds like a typical KC game. So that wasn't stepping up a notch. And we know what happened in the Lion game. I'd have to say Washington, Philly, and the Rams played strategic and quality football. And I don't know about the other. Well, Buffalo probably, they limited turnovers. I don't know that they played spectacular, but they did what they needed to do to win that game.
It just it's strange because you had these two powerhouses, and you have Kansas City. You lost the Lions, and we were all excited before the playoffs because there's some damn great teams, and just you come out of last week sitting there going, why do I feel like these teams aren't as good as previous year's teams? Mm-hmm. It's strange how the opinion of quality of football has changed so rapidly.
Well, we saw Minnesota, Green Bay, and Detroit quietly exit the playoffs. And that was the watershed division this year. So, the second season is not always the same as the first season.
Well, we've got Washington, Philadelphia. When was the last time Philadelphia beat Washington at home?
I'd have to look that up, huh?
I can't remember the last time.
Yep, they beat them in overtime in 2023. They beat them in this year. They did lose.
In Philadelphia?
Philadelphia beat Washington, yes. 34-31 in 2023. Reading it right now.
In Philadelphia?
Yeah, and 26-18, Philadelphia won this year. Philly lost at Washington.
Oh, I had it. Okay, all right.
You had it reversed.
In Philly.
Now,
Okay.
obviously, these teams know each other, so there aren't going to be any secrets. So, what's your initial kind of game keys, or what are you looking for? Any early expectations?
I am absolutely flummoxed at the line movement in that game. It's not a drizzle. It's a steady movement, and that surprises me. What
Yeah,
about
it's
you?
interesting because I know Ted told me that you would have guessed about 4.5, which is where the line opened, right? Or maybe that's where your numbers were expected to lie. I actually had this as a soft 6 according to my power numbers. So I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised at the move only because Washington's legit. But by power rating, I'm not surprised at a 5.5 or a 6.
Well, we're hitting. We've got multiple 6.5s now, so that
No, I hadn't even seen that.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah. Crossing sixes would be difficult to, I don't understand that one as much.
I just find that just seems like a lot of points, and it got there pretty darn fast. But the betting climate in NFL has changed over recent years, and the market moves faster than it used to. So it's just there were flat fours at one time. So it opened at I think 5 or 5.5 and went down to 4 and 4.5, and just surprised to see the 6.5 bounce out there.
Yeah, me too.
So you have the game at 6. That means you probably are not interested in betting the side or total.
Well, I mean, it's one part of the handicap, and the other parts are situational and matchup analysis. There's not going to be any situations that even remotely come into play here. These teams know each other, so now I'm working on the matchup analysis. But there's a real good chance that I'm on the sidelines again because my kinds of games are the ones where I feel like I have an edge over the odds makers or the other people who are betting the games. And at this time of year, do we really have edges? I mean, if you see something that juts out or whatever, it's absolutely possible. But my initial reaction is no, because I'm learning to respect Washington right now. So if you're Philly, how do you stop Daniels, for example?
Um, I'm not sure. I don't. Uh, I haven't really taken the time to even dive into the game at this point, so I haven't even thought. Just a simple question like that just threw me aback. It is like I don't know. It's the end of the year, and I've only got so much energy. And it worked
Yeah,
out last
I
week. I didn't
understand
do
that.
any work until I didn't start until Wednesday, and um,
Yeah, if you're doing it the way you do it and the way I do it with a lot of writing and stuff like that, when it comes whatever date this is, January 21st, it's really a long season because it starts for me after it really starts. The writing for this year starts around July 4th. So we're talking 7 months of steady thinking NFL and NCAA. And it is the time to take a break real quickly.
the pricing on these games are not reflecting anything to do with futures positions or anything like that. This is just the market becoming efficient based on the bets at this point.
So the other stats that I want to point out is Barkley has had 55 carries against Washington this year for 296 yards. So he's running like he's been running on everybody. In Washington's run D, it actually hasn't been solved. I mean, Detroit ran crazy on Washington. They just didn't run enough. So Barkley's going to get his yards. So I don't know what Washington can do to stop Barkley. I don't know what Philly has in store to stop Daniels, because for a rookie, he's just not turning it over.
It's because can Barkley be as efficient without Hurts being a running threat? I think Hurts is injured and is going to be a little bit limited.
So if I'm Philly, because that's a very fair question. If I'm Philly, I'm showing Hurts in the run pass option early in the game, just to give them something to think about. And then if they say, well, we don't really intend to run Hurts 12 times, but we want to show it to them as if we're going to do it, that I would do a misdirection in that regard. I'm going to give you another. Go ahead.
How one-dimensional do they become if he can't even fake it?
Well, that's the thing, is Hurts hardly ever throws the ball more than 25 to 27 times. He's actually lined. DraftKings, FanDuel, they don't wait. So he's actually lined at about 25 and a half, 26 or so pass attempts, which is pretty low for the NFL and kind of tells you what they want Philly's game plan to be. Gainwell will carry maybe 4 or 5 times, according to my early matchup analysis. So they expect Hurts to run 9 or 10 times.
What do you don't have an opinion on that yet?
No, not for the running game. But there's something that's pretty interesting about this game that I don't think will be brought up. Feel free, audience, Cris, to use it if you'd like to use it. In the 2 games that Washington has played, both fairly close against Philadelphia, Washington was -1 in turnover ratio and -3 in turnover ratio, which means that Washington competed even though they were combined -4, which is roughly 14. They gave away 14 points, 3.5 per turnover. So Washington gave away 14 points in these games and was competitive in both games. So there's something going on with Washington.
Well, now they've stopped turning the ball over.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that 2 of their worst games were against Philly, but otherwise they didn't really turn the ball over. A.J. Brown has actually hasn't done anything the last 2 games.
Yeah, he had some bad plays, didn't he?
It just wasn't there. They tried to go deep, and I know they're going to try to go deep again with him, but Hurts didn't connect. And we see a lot of that. Stretching the field is a nice dimension for Philadelphia, and they use it well, but they don't always connect on it. So that's an issue. Brown had 13 catches against Washington in his 2 games. So you got a guy who hasn't played well lately or hasn't been targeted. You have that side of him, and then you have the other side of him where he's been highly successful against Washington's DBs. So it's another chess match. It's only Tuesday, Cris, but these are the type of things that I'm thinking about as we head into the bulk of the week.
Yeah, Birdie says that game they were -3 was the game that they won.
Yes, that is correct. And that's hard to do in the NFL. Yeah. It's a fascinating matchup. And a lot of people are going to be saying, wow, this Washington team. But we'll see. Yeah, Lattimore, I mean, he's not the same Lattimore. I'm treating him as just another player right now.
Yeah. I guess looking at the line movement, it just feels like Washington's, it's the banana in the tailpipe side.
Yeah, Washington's not afraid to run against Philly. Like a lot of teams, the Rams, to their credit, stuck with the run, and Kieran Williams actually had one of his better games. People are really scared to run against Philly, but Washington's seen him twice, so that familiarity will help. Yeah, I have no opinion right now, but I'm just taking different nuggets, and then I'm going to look and see how this affects the schemes, how I expect this to go with game flow. I will say this: Philly better start making some field goals.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or extra points.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. Yeah, I like to watch the line movement on these games. I enjoyed watching the line movement last week, and just kind of absorbing what's going on here. I wouldn't have guessed that Philadelphia would have ever seen 6.5. It was pretty clear that it was going to go to 7 with the Rams, but not on Tuesday. It wasn't clear. I wouldn't have thought last Tuesday. I would have never thought the line was going to go to 7. I mean, it didn't become obvious it was going to 7 until the day before.
Yeah, what you say makes sense because of the travel and everything else, and Philly rested, stuff like that. But the public usually doesn't bet on Monday or Tuesday morning. So do you think this is sharp money moving it past 6?
Well, I don't. I'm at a little bit of a deficit because I haven't kept up with how Hertz's health has been presented over the last 24 hours, because maybe the line went down too far and it's become clear that Hertz is going to play, and it's being presented that he's fine, and so people are feeling confident with Philly. Is that what's moving this line, or is it being prodded along, for when the limits go high and come back on the other side?
So interestingly enough, when Philly put up 33 points, turnover aided probably a little bit. It was Kenny Pickett at quarterback for most of that game, because that's the game Hertz got hurt in. So Pickett was 14 of 24 for 143, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So Pickett has played against Washington, and that game was almost exactly a month ago on December 22nd. And Brown caught 8 passes and Smith caught 6. These are guys that haven't stretched the needle lately, but he pretty much caught almost every pass that Pickett threw. Now, Hertz was in and he threw a couple passes as well, but almost every pass catch in that game was from the wideouts in that game, which is completely different than what we're seeing lately with Goddard, the tight end, getting a majority of the action. I don't think Goddard played in that game.
No, I don't think he did.
Goddard didn't play. Hertz barely played. So there's a lot of moving parts in this game.
I don't think a rookie quarterback has made the Super Bowl, just the conference championships, and there's like 6 of them, correct?
Yeah, I believe, I haven't verified it, but I heard that said.
Yeah. Well, okay. I don't know. This Buffalo Kansas City it's annoyed me even before there was a lineup for some reason. I don't know. Are you looking forward to this game?
I don't know. I think I would have looked forward to it if Baltimore was in it, because I, just as a fan standpoint, wanted to see what Lamar could do. Could he get over the hump and stuff? But I don't know. I mean, I think it's fascinating that, not to me, that Mahomes could three-peat or whatever, but Buffalo, even in they played Denver, and they were so inspired, and it was a great game, and they beat them, and I had Denver in that game, and then they just beat Baltimore. But their defense still hasn't played perfectly.
I don't like the. I just don't. I can't get behind Buffalo just because Buffalo fans are obnoxious as far as I'm concerned. They're always thinking they're better than they are, and they're really, there's a lot of good things about the team, but that defense is just so bad, and It just seems like Buffalo's been getting fortunate here to come away with their situation, and it's hard to even get behind Kansas City the way that they won last week, and the flopping and the refs, and I don't feel like getting behind either one of these teams.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about Buffalo first. Running back Cook is not the forgotten guy right now.
Boy, he looked good. He looked really good.
And Ty Johnson, when he came in, he actually carried the ball. Say, oh, Ty Johnson, and they're gonna throw. He's in the game, and they ran right at him, and he gained 6-7 yards twice in that stretch. So Buffalo's offensive line, which is, I believe, the best at protecting their quarterback. Josh Allen's been sacked so few times this year. They were opening run holes as well. And if they're going to challenge Kansas City, who played better against the run during the year than they have in the last 5, 6, 7 years, but in the playoffs, they had a little bit of an average look, not a below average, but an average look against the run. If Buffalo is really going to commit to Cook and continue to have Josh Allen not throw the 40 times that he used to throw the ball, this is exciting run pass balance for Buffalo, who has like 6 different targets, and they could go to any one of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt their offense is pretty darn good, and they do have a lot of different options on how they want to do that.
I'm Shakur will catch the most passes probably, but Amari Cooper is there, even though they haven't used him that much. Coleman, the rookie, is there. He's dropped off a little bit, but they're there. Dawson Knox, Kincaid, they have 2 tight end formations that they can use. They use Cook and Ty Johnson out of the backfield. Samuel is starting to get increased usage. Mac Hollins gets increased usage. It's going to be hard for Kansas City to key on any one aspect.
I don't know what an extreme ultra organization. I don't understand. Probably not. I guess.
Do not know.
I don't know where do you think that line? Where did you have this line?
I had this line either 1 or 1.5. I think I set it 1. And I said, wow, I'm setting it 1. I'm setting only KC 1. That seems crazy. And then when it came out 1, 1.5, I said, well, I guess people kind of agree with me. We didn't get the Kansas City public bump. I somehow think there will be enough public money that you may see a 2. I don't know if it's there now because I haven't checked it all today.
A 2? There's 2.5s out there.
See, I'm behind the times, but this opened 1, 1.5.
Yeah, it's 1.5 to 2.5 right now. It's
yeah. Okay, so it's already hit that. Well,
it's actually more. It's mainly 1.5 though.
Yeah. So it's not 2.5. There's really no way that anybody who does either power ratings or anything else would. If there's any kind of a 3, it's going to be bet within seconds.
Oh, so,
yeah. I think we're looking at it roughly 2, which to most people says just pick the winner of the game and you'll be fine. Do the money line.
Well, it's
and to teaser players, they're going to want to tease it over a touchdown.
Did you give them a playoff bump on your setting the line?
Only that initial. I gave them not a playoff bump because I know they're at home and they're KC and they're whatever. I gave them a roster bump for Hopkins and Brown and Pacheco all back, and none of them really contributed like we were talking last week. So the question is, was the roster bump warranted? And I would say partially still warranted, but not fully still warranted, because if they had the same roster as they did last year, Kelsey would have been double and triple teamed, and he wouldn't have gone off last week. But they couldn't double and triple team him. They had to pick their poison. And Buffalo's going to have to pick their poison too, because like you said, this is not a great defense, and guys are going to be open. Just like Buffalo's guys are going to be open, Brown's going to be open. Hopkins is going to be open. Kelsey and even tight end Gray might be open. If they bring in the third running back, they'll swing him out in the flat. Weather is not necessarily going to be a factor. I looked that up before we went on air. It's just reminds me of one of these games, like the title game last night, like the Buffalo game against Baltimore, where it just slips over the total. If you want to look at anything, that somehow there's just a little bit more offense compared to the defense in this game. And I don't think these are the kinds of teams that are going to spar and take it easy in the first quarter. I enjoyed getting a lot of first quarter unders as teams felt each other out the first 6 minutes or so. But I don't think you get that in a Buffalo KC game. I think they come out swinging if they know what's best for them.
Yeah, but I think both of these teams are capable of long drives, and that.
Let me backtrack and say that's a good point, because the way people have been playing Mahomes for the last 2 years has been make them drive the whole field. So they don't give up the big play anymore. And with KC, they better try to make Buffalo drive the whole field. So drives could take longer, like you said, but I think drives can finish.
Well, sure, they can finish fast. So. I'm no totals aficionado, I'll tell you that. My instincts were under in both, but we got a long ways before Sunday.
Yeah. I do expect a trick play out of Andy Reid, not necessarily a trick play like a halfback auction, but something that we haven't seen, where they run somebody in motion and they do something strange and there's a shovel pass here or a no look this or that or whatever. I think Kansas City is going to have something up its sleeve if they think that Buffalo is going to go heavy blitz.
Kelsey does look slow this year, but he's bigger, harder to bring him down.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to rehash something that I shared with you a few years ago, right after COVID. And it was something that I published in public, so everybody saw it. It was something you and I talked about, and you may have talked about on other shows at the time. And it's something not only I sent you, but back when I was placing bets and stuff like that, you placed a couple of these plays for me. And so I'm going to read this and then talk about penalties. So about 4 years ago at this time, I'm going to read it. As most people know, penalties are not being called at a high rate this year, part pandemic related, part emphasis on fewer offensive holding calls. And then the play I recommended to you was total penalties over 9.5 plus money or over 10 plus money. And I had 4 reasons for it, and I documented it and sent it out to everybody. The non-calls in last week's 2 games defensively have people wondering about what it takes to get a defensive pass interference call. I expect the refs are aware of this and won't let the DBs smother the wide receivers. That was point 1. Point 2, we get a lower set. All these penalties were being set at 12.5, and now we got a 10 at plus money, because of the recent non-calls. In a do-or-die situation, I said tempers are about to flare up. There's too much on the line for Super Bowl penalties and stuff like that. Referees. The referee had officiated 2 Kansas City games this year and a recent Super Bowl involving Kansas City. In those 2 games that he refereed with Kansas City, 35 penalties were called. That's a lot more than 10 per game. And 13 were called in the Super Bowl, which was the highest in the past 5 years. Finally, that particular year, I said that Kansas City has a history of committing penalties, mainly offsides. And we've always seen them go offsides. They were offsides last week again. They were 28th in penalties, which means they have the 5th most penalties in that particular year. So I'm demonstrating that. And by the way, in that game, if you remember, Chris, they had 9 penalties. You were counting. Ted was counting. They had 9 in the first half.
Yeah, they were
in that game.
In the first half.
I mean, it was one of the strongest plays. I don't think I've ever bet that much on a prop and double bet it, because it was ridiculous. You see this overcompensation. I'm bringing it up now because we may see the flip now, because Mahomes was protected so much, and everybody's written about it. The league knows about it. It's out there. Mahomes is wearing a skirt and everybody else is wearing, gym clothes and stuff like that. So what did the NFL do? They assigned Cleet Bakeman to be the referee in this game. What would you say Kansas City's win percentage has been the last 4 years? 80%? I mean, they've won 2 Super Bowls. They don't lose very often, right? With Cleet Blakeman as the referee, Kansas City has 5 wins and 6 losses. And they're 4-6-1 against the spread. NFL Ref Stats put this out, so I want to give him credit for bringing this up. NFL Ref Stats, if you follow him. The NFL is aware. They assigned Cleet Bateman for a reason. It's my belief that if Kansas City wins this game, they'll win it on the field, and that penalties will be called even and fair square. That's my take on this game based on what I wrote 4 years ago, that there'll be a compensation the other way, and how I see it now. Any thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, I was actually already looking at his updates on this situation. I was looking at a tweet he sent out afterward, commenting on the unnecessary roughness and roughing the passer penalties. Cleat leads the NFL in unnecessary roughness penalties.
Yeah,
and
it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I do like that the stuff that he sends out about these refs. NFL Ref Stats 1 is the Twitter handle. He sends out some interesting stuff. I'm not entirely. I haven't really applied it. It's just nice to know. Have you applied any of his info? Found it?
It's kind of been in the back of my mind. I applied it in one game about 4 or 5 weeks ago but only because I had a pre-concern about something, and I saw his thing related, and I said, this verifies my opinion, and it worked. But I will also make it kind of an off-season project of mine to kind of go back and filter what he said, and then maybe apply it in certain circumstances. It's never going to change my opinion. It might enhance an opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. The referee tendencies and records with certain teams or home and away. It's actually shocking how few times some of these refs have actually been involved in games with particular teams. I mean, when you're having 17 games a year, you would have thought they'd be running into these refs more often, and they don't. So, what are you supposed to glean over, a handful of times that they've been involved with each other?
Yeah, Hector brings up a good point. It's not your same crew. It's combined crews, and that's what NFL Ref Stats was saying as well. He wants to get more information as to what each component of the crew. So he's really breaking it down. I think this is more of a statement because we know at the beginning of the year, if the refs want to crack down on a certain type of penalty, they tell the league. And in preseason and in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, you see them calling more offensive holding calls or less or more, tackle ineligible or got linemen downfield or something like that. And then it slips away after the first 4 weeks and it morphs back into whatever. But the NFL, I personally think, and I can't confirm it with anybody, made a statement by assigning this ref to this game. They're basically telling you this game is not going to favor either team. And that means not going to favor Kansas City in terms of the penalties.
Yeah, I think but I think that we kind of knew that that was going to be the case after last week. There was just way too much backlash.
Yeah, and that's what happens. You get these sudden changes, and that's why that Super Bowl thing that I read to you was so important. We got such an unbelievable line with a ref that calls a lot of penalties and a team that makes a lot of penalties. I mean, that line should never been 9.5 plus money or 10 plus money. It opened 10 plus money. It closed at 9.5 plus money. So nobody, I mean, I bet it at 10 and then I had to rebet it with you and others at 9.5. It was just crazy.
I was going to say something and I forgot what it was. Well, you see the differences where the league generally kind of tells the teams ahead of time, hey, we're going to be calling this. And you'll also see in the primetime games, especially those Thursday night games, that they'll call those games a little differently because they want to send a message to the rest of the league also in these highlighted situations. So there are definitely those trends that are easy to follow.
The one that you can't really get a help from a handicapping standpoint is when two teams don't like each other and you see a skirmish in the first quarter. After that, every little thing is going to be called and there's going to be 17 penalties. If a fight breaks out early, they're going to call everything. And I'm not exactly sure how, does that affect the total? Well, if it does, which way? Does it affect the clock running more? Because the penalty, if it's after a play where it was running clock, they're going to run it again. That's stuff I haven't really gotten into, but you could tell certain refs are not going to let something go by. If somebody's pushing and shoving, they're going to call this stuff. And then certain refs are going to call after a touchdown celebration that looks kind of innocuous or whatever, they're going to say, flag it for 15 yards, and then you're on notice that you can't do any celebration. But these are in-game things, so I can't glean much from that.
Just the thought of it kind of, feels like a weight to carry of mental energy thinking about it. But we do need to get to the point where they can quickly overturn, bad calls. I mean, if you have a face mask and it wasn't a face mask and you can see it right away, you need to, or when you have people tripping over themselves or when you're calling, certain penalties helmet to helmet and the helmet did never hit the helmet, things like that need to be resolved too.
And I think they will to a point, but they don't want to delay the game any longer. But I think they will to a point. The one that's never going to go away is that pass interference. Was it pass interference? Was it not? And it could be a 50-yard penalty if it's on a long pass. College rule is 15 yards. I've always been partial to the college rule as opposed to the NFL rule. But, that's a game changer if one ref calls something 40 yards downfield and another doesn't.
Yeah, I don't like the. It's even more brutal in the NFL when they're in situations where the guy wasn't going to catch the ball anyway. I mean, I know it's supposed to be a catchable ball, but they have a lot of leniency with that.
Well, that's probably the most I'm going to talk about the refs in any one segment.
You know what? At this time of year, the books are moving on their action, and I do think the leagues would prefer to keep games close, but I haven't seen any overt sort of decision making that have kept the games unreasonably close. Did you? I haven't seen any of that this playoffs yet. I don't feel.
No. I think the aspect of with this high definition TV and all these cameras and this and that is we expect absolute perfection. And if we probably went back and watched 1960s and 1970s football, they were getting away with anything and everything. I mean, they were crutching. I mean, the stuff that went on under piles, after a fumble or after a tackle or whatever. Some of the characters of the game that played offensive line in those days and defense and, black and white TVs and stuff like that. So it's under a microscope now because everybody can see it with their own eyes, and it's so fast motion. Remember, these athletes are bigger and faster than they've ever been. So it's a hard game.
Oh yeah, it isn't easy what these refs have to deal with. The kid, I mean, everything's just faster, harder.
Yeah, tennis terminology. Obviously, they've done a lot away from lines people, so they're doing all this electronic, so you can't really argue with anybody. And there was a tweet about 10 days ago or whatever. There's a lady on the tour, Yelena Ostapenko, and she has a reputation for kind of yelling at everything and thinking this was a bad call and this was a bad call. And the tweet was, my favorite matchup in all of tennis is Ostapenko versus the electronic line call. So, I mean, you can't win, but she's still going to try on that. But it was just such a funny thing. So you could go the other way and make everything artificial intelligence, but still a game with humans.
Well, this is the. I'll just quickly mention something since somebody brought up, where the, about the lines. This is the time of year where the public moves lines. So, not every. So you kind of read the markets a little bit different, and you get different opportunities. So. Last night's championship game, the money line was out of whack for what the line was. So if you there was things to do with that, and we know from the one Super Bowl, the famous Patriots Giants 14-point line spread, and you can find a money line minus 330 or minus 340. It was insane. So. The public likes to bet the money lines. They want to get extra money. They don't understand the points. So always take a look in shot money lines this time of year because you can find some really, really nice values and you can get really creative with some prices that you can find. You can scalp or you can use them into other bets, but just be aware of it that your money lines are going to be out of whack at times. So it's you may find that the money line is a much better price than laying the points. You definitely want to lay the money line because it's just so much better value. Or you may not want to be taking the money line on the dog because it's not paying you enough. You're better off taking the points.
Yeah. And because the game has changed and prop awareness is out there and stuff like that, the prop market is going to be hit heavy this week and obviously Super Bowl week because there's more and more people in it.
So the public going to be on Philly or Washington? I think Washington's got to be the public dog, no?
Yeah, I think you'll see public money on Washington. Could be right. You never know. And in the other game, I'm not sure there's a public side.
Yeah, that's odd. I feel like that line really doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel the Washington has to come down, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it'll settle down. I think it'll settle back to 5.5, 6.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'm kind of talked out. I'm not jumping up and down about these games.
Well, you get a chance to talk about it again tomorrow, and then Ted and the two of us will talk about it again on Thursday, and you'll either be completely talked out or energized. We'll just keep trying to come up with different things to see if we can find an edge here, there, or everywhere. But thanks to everybody who...
I'm going to make a quick comment here. Well, you're okay, but typically you don't want to be teasing down a 6-point favorite.
Yeah.
We're anticipating that this line's going to come back down. So you don't want to be teasing teams if the money lines available are less, in the 270s or lower, because you're paying for, 280 plus value. So just be aware of that. I have a feeling that the money line will be lower than
Yeah.
it is right now.
I think Washington will be hit on the money line.
Yeah. So that makes that teaser leg a little weaker. So what I also like to do in this situation, I haven't looked at it yet, is I'm going to look at alternate lines. If what can I find a great alternate line that kind of essentially creates the same as a teaser? You can find parlays with alternate lines, a lot, paired with a money line that are cheaper than what the teaser is. So just be aware of that.
That's all I got.
Okay. I'll be Bet US tomorrow, and we'll be back on Thursday, same bet channel. And everybody have a good evening. We'll see you in a couple days.